Okay, let us begin the program with Gail Greer, who approaches the issues. What is COP? What are the issues this year? Gail holds a PhD in sociology. She served as president of a private wealth management company for many years. She is now in supposed retirement, an environmental and political activist working through Seniors for Climate Action Now and the Green Party. Gail.
Thank you very much, Richard. I would like to give a brief overview of COP26. COP stands for Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. It has been meeting since 1995. So this is the 26th meeting. It was canceled last year due to COVID. And it's on right now in Glasgow, another week to go. It's being hosted, of course, by the United Kingdom in partnership with Italy. The United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change was held, it emerged from the Real Earth Summit held in 1992. And the challenge the countries there faced is the same that we face today. Dangerous levels of anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions are causing global warming. Disruption of climate and ecosystems are posing a threat to life on Earth. The dilemma caught up in that situation is that greenhouse gases and global warming are caused mostly by a few rich and rapidly developing countries. The destructive effects are borne by many who've contributed very little to the problem, however. Therefore, inequality and social injustice are intrinsic to the global warming crisis. At Rio, they agreed on an ethical principle to address the problem, and that was one of recognizing that we have common but differentiated responsibilities for this situation. The first attempt to put some real flesh on those bones was in 1997 at the COP in Kyoto, and it is known as the Kyoto Protocol. Hope was for a legally binding agreement, and it was based on a grand bargain between developing countries, including China, who would be exempt from cutting emissions. In return, the advanced economies, the United States in particular, demanded a carbon trading system. The Kyoto Protocol wasn't ratified until 2005. Low targets were set for emissions cuts. Some countries didn't sign on, others backed out, for example, the United States and Canada. And as you can see, emissions and concentrations of carbon dioxide have continued to rise exponentially. Second major attempt to reach a global agreement was at COP21 in Paris in 2015 and produced the Paris Agreement. This employed a very different take on common but differentiated responsibilities. Forget legally binding. All parties will voluntarily commit to cutting emissions, targeting 2 and preferably 1.5 degrees centigrade of global warming over pre-industrial levels. Each country will come up with its own nationally determined contribution, or NDC, to be ratcheted up every 5 years. And yes, the Paris Agreement, Article 6, calls for a global carbon market. So what are the goals in Glasgow at COP26? According to Boris Johnson, it's to keep the goal of 1.5 alive, and it is definitely on life support. So for the first focus of then is on emissions, targeting reductions, and setting time frame for them. And the major purpose of this conference was to hear what the first 5-year ratchet up of NDCs would produce. Now, there are other side agreements that are being proposed that are also addressed at emissions. For example, powering past coal by 2030 or so. This is the United Kingdom and Canada. Over 190 countries have signed on. Reducing methane emissions 30% by 2030. This was a US initiative. Over 100 countries have signed on. Ending fossil fuel funding abroad, I emphasize, by 2022. Is an initiative with 21 countries so far, but Canada has signed on. It's abroad, remember. Earlier targets for more electric vehicles will come up this week. Reversing deforestation and land degradation by 2030 was another initiative. It produced 20 billion in public and private funding commitments, and over 100 countries, including Canada, have signed on. Now, in September of this year, the United Nations produced a synthesis report on all the new NDC commitments that have been made, I think, up to the end of July this year. And their assessment in 2030, global greenhouse emissions will be 16.3% higher than in 2010. The objective, of course, was to have them 45% lower. So will COP26 make NDCs an annual commitment, a biannual commitment? All of this is on the table this week. But you can feel something else happening. The goalposts are being moved, the time frames are being loosened, and the goal of getting rid of greenhouse gas emissions is also loosened. The phrase that is on everyone's lips is net zero by 2050. Now, apart from the emissions agenda, there is a financial agenda at COP26. The first part of it deals with market-based solutions. And the first major initiative, headed by Mark Carney, is the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. Over companies, private financial companies, banks, insurance companies have signed on to net zero by 2050. And they're very interested, of course, and believe that it's essential to making that alliance possible to finalize the rules for that market in carbon offsets. And this is the most difficult problem. It blew up Madrid last time around. And the issue, of course, is cui bono, who benefits? The second part of the financial agenda at COP26 consists of social justice programs. Over 10 years ago, there was a commitment made at a COP in Cancun for climate finance of $100 billion annually, starting in 2020, to go to less developed countries for adaptation, not just mitigation, because they often don't have much to mitigate, but to adapt to the effects of climate change. This is at 80 billion, and the goal now may be 2023. The other major social justice program that is on the table at the insistence of less developed and most vulnerable countries is loss and damage, to compensate countries when mitigation and adaptation are no longer an option. Again, it's been on the table at a number of COPs and is still pending. The final point I would like to make about COP26 is its social organization. We've got 25 to 30,000 people attending in Glasgow, and typically at major COPs. They are broken up into two zones. The blue zone includes all of the government delegations, their scientific and financial advisors, the international financial agencies, etc., all accredited by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And all of the parties that are involved in that formal structure of the Conference of the Parties tend to divide up into negotiating blocks, and there are 10
Gail,
or 15 of
1
them.
minute.
Thank you. The final sector is the green zone, aptly named. This is civil society, NGOs, and media. To me, this is the vital sector, when the only court now enforcing these agreements is public opinion. Thank you.